What if we already had flying cars? Every generation was promised the same thing. By the year 2000, we'd all be flying to work. It's 2026 and you're still sitting in traffic on the highway staring at brake lights. But what if the engineers had actually cracked it? What if flying cars weren't science fiction? What if they'd been rolling off assembly lines for the last 20 years? The world you'd wake up to tomorrow wouldn't just look different. Everything about how we live, work, and build our cities would have fundamentally changed. The average American spends 54 minutes a day commuting. In cities like Los Angeles or Atlanta, it's closer to 90. That's not just wasted time, it's wasted life. Flying cars wouldn't just reduce traffic. They'd eliminate the concept entirely. When your vehicle moves in 3 dimensions instead of 2, bottlenecks become physically impossible. No intersections, no merge lanes, no rubbernecking. Your commute from the suburbs to downtown drops from an hour and a half to 12 minutes. And the road infrastructure that costs taxpayers billions every year? Most of it becomes irrelevant overnight. This is where it gets wild. If people can fly directly to any building, you don't need streets. You don't need parking garages taking up entire city blocks. You don't need highways cutting neighborhoods in half. Cities would be redesigned from the sky down. Every building gets a landing pad. The ground level, currently dominated by asphalt and concrete, gets reclaimed for parks, pedestrian spaces, and housing. Manhattan wouldn't need the Lincoln Tunnel. Los Angeles wouldn't need its 12-lane freeways. The most valuable real estate in the world suddenly isn't downtown. It's anywhere with a clear sky above it. If you can fly to work in 15 minutes, why would you live 30 miles away when you could live 300 miles away? Flying cars would trigger the biggest migration in modern history. Rural land values would explode. That cabin by the lake isn't a weekend getaway anymore. It's your primary residence. You work in Chicago, but you live in the Wisconsin woods. You commute to Manhattan from the Catskills. Suburban sprawl wouldn't spread outward in rings like it does now. It would scatter in every direction, and the entire concept of a commuter belt would dissolve. Flying cars don't just change how we move, they create entirely new industries: aerial mechanics, sky traffic control operators, vertical parking structures, flight insurance, landing pad construction. The automotive industry as we know it merges with aerospace. Instead of Ford versus Toyota, it's Boeing versus Tesla. Your local mechanic now needs a turbine certification. Every rooftop contractor in the country is booked for the next decade installing landing pads. And the oil industry? With most designs running on electric vertical thrust, petroleum demand craters. OPEC's worst nightmare isn't solar panels. It's a flying Honda Civic. Now here's the reality check. 7 billion people with access to 3-dimensional travel is a regulatory nightmare. Who controls the airspace above your house? Can your neighbor fly over your backyard at 200 feet? What happens when someone has a mechanical failure at 3,000 feet above a school? Current air traffic control handles about 45,000 flights a day in the U.S. Flying cars would mean 45 million. You'd need an entirely new AI-driven traffic system, because no human workforce could manage that volume. And drunk driving? It becomes drunk flying, and the consequences are exponentially worse. Privacy essentially ceases to exist. When anyone can hover outside your 20th floor window, the concept of a private upper floor disappears. Gated communities can't gate the sky. Celebrities, politicians, anyone who values seclusion now lives in a fishbowl. And security? Every flying car is potentially a weapon. The same vehicle that takes your kids to school could be aimed at a building. Governments would demand kill switches, mandatory flight recorders, geofenced no-fly zones over every sensitive location. The freedom that flying cars promise would come wrapped in the most invasive surveillance infrastructure ever built. It's not all dystopian, though. Emergency response times would drop from minutes to seconds. An ambulance doesn't need to navigate traffic or one-way streets. It flies directly to you. Rural areas that currently wait 30 minutes for a paramedic would get the same response time as downtown Manhattan. Fire trucks could approach a burning building from above, where the fire actually is, instead of fighting their way up from the ground floor. Search and rescue in mountains, oceans, and disaster zones becomes trivially easy. Flying cars wouldn't just be convenient. They'd save thousands of lives every year. Let's be honest about who actually gets flying cars first. They wouldn't cost the same as a Honda Accord. Not initially. The first generation would be luxury items, priced like private jets. The sky becomes a literal class divide. The wealthy fly above the problems they use to drive through. Low-income neighborhoods still deal with ground-level noise, pollution, and congestion while watching the rich glide overhead. Eventually costs come down. They always do. But for at least a decade, the sky would belong to the people who can afford it. And that visual, the rich literally above the poor, would become the defining image of inequality. Strip away the economics and the politics for a moment. Just think about the experience. You step into your car, lift off from your driveway, and in seconds, you're above the tree line. The neighborhood shrinks below you. You can see the curve of the river, the patchwork of farms, the skyline in the distance. Your first flight would be the most breathtaking experience of your life. Your 1,000th flight would be as boring as your commute is now. That's the most human thing about flying cars. We'd get used to it. We'd complain about sky traffic. We'd eat breakfast while cruising at 2,000 feet and not even look out the window. The miracle would become mundane. The technology is closer than you think. Companies like Joby Aviation, Lilium, and Archer are already testing electric vertical takeoff vehicles. The physics works. The batteries are almost there. What's missing isn't engineering, it's infrastructure, regulation, and political will. We built an entire civilization around roads. Switching to sky lanes means rebuilding everything from insurance law to building codes to how we zone residential neighborhoods. The flying car isn't a technology problem. It's a civilization problem. And civilizations move slow. Flying cars wouldn't just change transportation. They'd redraw every map, restructure every city, collapse every commute, and force us to answer questions about privacy, inequality, and freedom we haven't even thought to ask yet. The technology is almost here. The question isn't whether we can build flying cars. It's whether we're ready for what happens after we do. Because once the sky opens up, nothing on the ground stays the same.